And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Hi, warm welcome and thanks for joining me on another episode of Against the Grain. I've got a special guest for you this evening, Gary S. Bobroff, who is the author of Crop Circles, Jung and the Re-Emergence of the Archetypal Feminine, and Jungian psychology bestseller, Knowledge in a Nutshell, Carl Jung. He has degrees from the University of British Columbia, Canada, and Pacifica Graduate Institute of Santa Barbara, California. Gary speaks and gives seminars internationally and is the founder of Jungian Online and the Jung Arc Academy, featuring live video personal growth courses. I'm going to dive straight into this because I've been itching to get into conversation with this guy for some time now. The book is fantastic and we're going to dive into that as well. So please welcome Gary S. Bobroff. Hi, Gary. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, Gary. Good to be with you.
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm really, really excited to have you on this evening. I've been going through your book and I watched the podcast that you did with Matt Barone on Curious Dimensions. And I'm aware, I've watched it a couple of times actually. I'm aware that you've covered some great stuff in that when you first come across the formations, when you visited one in Saskatchewan and came across the UK and went to the Milk Hill formation and so on. So I don't want to duplicate what you did with Matt. So I will leave a link for that in the description below. And if anybody wants to go and check that out, I really encourage them to do it because it's a great interview with you. But I wanted to dive straight into your book actually. This is a masterpiece.
Oh, thank you.
The lady that did your artwork, when I said that I was having you on the show, she popped up and said, "I did the artwork for the front cover of your book."
Oh,
I forgot.
Regine? Yeah,
Regine, that's it. Yeah. So that was a nice touch actually. Before I had you on.
You. Yeah, Canadian collage artist. Yeah,
fantastic. It's a great. I don't know. It reminds me a bit psychedelic. It's got a bit of a psychedelic edge to it, hasn't it? I think. So I wanted to dive into that. I want to dive straight into chapter 3, where you start with a history of our responses to crop circles could be said to be a story of our relating to a stranger, another. And you say another who in his strangeness is always suspect. Before science, it would indeed be cast as a devil. In a science culture, its natural causes that can be known and understood, no more magic. What can these reactions tell us about who we are and where we've been? Karen Alexander, one of my sort of peers in the crop circles, she introduced me to the concept of something called cards on the table. She was a psychotherapist, and she said the crop circles are I
know Karen.
You know Karen, great.
Yeah.
So she introduced me many, many years ago, I think in 2001 or something, maybe around the time of the Milk Hill formation, to this notion of crop circles being cards on the table that reflect us back to ourselves. And I did a presentation some time ago called Mirrors for Humanity, basically borrowing that theme from Karen and showing where I think they reflect things back to us. That's really where you're coming from, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the big part of the book is about our psychology of our response to crop circles. So our response to this mysterious phenomenon. For the folks that don't have the book at home, chapter 1, I look at the science so that we know that we have objective evidence that there's something going on here. Chapter 2, I look at the history. We know it goes back hundreds of years. This is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on hundreds of years. And we have evidence of, documented, clear, the mowing devil, crop circle, all of that. This goes back a long time. So, something's been going on. It's been noticed in the UK for a very long time. And so what is the history of all our different reactions? So yeah, they casted it as the devil in the late medieval or whatever you want to call it stage. And, and then we get to science and people think it's a weather phenomenon and all that. And then we get to our age and then we have all these different things. And then, there's so many different camps in the crop circle world, and they have different agendas. And I would say overall, it's great to hear that Karen is talking about that, because overall, I think as is with any phenomenon or mystery or thing, everybody has their own camps and has their own responses. And I would say, unfortunately, most of those responses are unconscious. So that's why Karen's talking about that, because whether it's on the one side, as I certainly have encountered and could tell you stories, there's people in the crop circle world who absolutely insist every single one is an authentic, alien thing or whatever.
Whatever, yeah.
And there is no, there's no hoaxes. None of them are man-made. They're all made by aliens. And that, it's hard to believe that when you've seen people making them in the fields with the boards. So,
sure.
So you get that all the way to,
they're all hoaxed.
Yeah, they're all hoaxed on the other side. And then you also have, I do talk about power later in the book, and maybe you'll want to get into that a little later, but I think there are, powerful forces in our world, institutional governments, etc., that have a vested interest in this and are clearly interested in it. And they're encouraging folks, and certainly I think had something to do with the Doug and Dave hoax.
Me too.
Doug and Dave hoax was, there are forces that want us to believe that all of it was not real. So, where can we sit in between everything's real, nothing's real? Where's that middle point of owning our own relationship to it and looking at our own responses and what we want to be true, what we wish cast.
Right. Right. And that's what starts the journey, or it did for me. I took when I was at university, I was living in digs, and the landlord was an ex-biochemist. He'd done his postdoc in Berkeley, and he came back to Cardiff and got a first in psychology in 2 years, and then finished his career lecturing in psychology, and was writing a book on consciousness, what he considered to be the biological basis. This guy was, I don't do psychic, I don't do mind as a field. It's in the brain, it's neurons. He was that kind of guy, and would not entertain anything to do with anything sort of in the paranormal realms. But it was great for me to ground my arguments in rationality, in looking at things and gathering data and stuff like that. He was a really good teacher for me in that respect, particularly whilst I was going through university. And I took him to the crop circles, and when I first showed him them, and it was like dismissive and so on, but he came with me, and he was in his 70s by then, and he said something really valuable to me. He said, if I have a continuum and I've got hoax on one end and aliens on the other end, he said, I think it's advantageous to float somewhere in the middle and not be certain. And that served me so well, because then I could step back, and also he diffused a lot of the emotional content that I had in knowing that there was something going on, and sort of combative with everybody that was sort of like dismissive of it and so on. So he was such a good sparring partner for me for that. But echoing what you're saying, really, that that between those two camps we have to find a position, and then we examine ourselves, don't we? What biases are we projecting onto it? What are we wishing for it? And that's when we start diving into the Jungian sort of shadow side of things.
Yeah, thank you. And that's the toughest part, right? Because we all, we want to think, our thoughts are the best, our beliefs are the best, we know the most, and, this is a mystery, and it's
a mystery
every time.
Yeah. I got involved in a documentary that we called Embrace the Mystery back in 2008, 2009. It's a Norwegian production. And it was a great title, because, that's really it, isn't it? If you can embrace the mystery and not want an answer, there's so much else going on in this whole that still keeps open. It's still the gift that keeps on giving, I find, for me personally on my journey, by not getting into the whole argument about who's making them, but looking at how we respond to it.
Yeah, and it's also, unless you've been, it's pretty hard for anybody to make an argument really on who is the author of Crop Circles. Beyond that, it's a mystery. I think that's, and there's just, and there certainly is a whole kind of new age world about speculation about this, that, and the other, and every speculation is okay, and none of it has to be grounded.
Yeah. The
right buzzwords. So,
but Bert Janssen said years ago, is another pearl I picked up along the way, was when Bert Janssen said, when people come up to me and say, I think it's this, he says, well, I think that tells me more about you than it does about the actual phenomena. And I think that's largely true, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I went out to, yeah, I'm just going to leave it at, I've had a couple of times where I've been in the crop circle world and people have wanted to, are totally committed that every single one's real, and they'll really get up and it's like, okay, I'm allowed to have a difference of opinion.
Well, and that's funny because that I recently did a presentation on, the crop circles which said we oppose deception.
Yes.
And do you know about the Milk Hill script that appeared sort of in 1990? Yeah, the sort of Latin script, we oppose acts of craft and cunning, it was supposed to be translated as. So I used those two as the basis for an exploration in what is deception and what do we mean by truth and how do we explore that. And I did a presentation on it, and I did a sort of 30-minute kind of visual thing that's on my YouTube channel for it recently. It was a really interesting exploration of what do we think about deception, right? What about self-deception? What about how we hide, in the Jungian sense, the shadow? I bring that up in the whole presentation. Do you think then that the main intent of the authors really is not to have fundamentalists on either side, but to spark us into this inner exploration of ourselves and look at ourselves in how we're reflecting on individually and as a culture?
Well, it's hard to draw too many generalizations about what it is trying to tell us, but I'll tell you a couple things. And a lot of what I'm going to say now is pretty Jungian or, my own belief system, but, whether it's crop circles or a phenomenon we see in the world like synchronicity,
Mm-hmm.
where you have a meaningful occurrence that really speaks to you, there seems, to me, part of what's happening when you have a synchronistic experience or when you are really have get blown away by the crop circle world is some part of it. It is this little wink that something bigger is going on. And boy, I think we need that. I mean, our culture is high on itself. Our culture is inflated. Our culture, and it's made rationalism into a religion.
Yes.
And it does not understand that it has done that, which makes it very dangerous. And the just to briefly explain the inflation piece. So as we've gotten more knowledge, more intellectual power over the centuries, we sort of done away with God. God's, not so sure about that. Put that away. And where's that energy? Jung said we had a religious function in us. Where's that energy in us that was projected in the awe of world, in the awe of life? Where has that gone? Well, it's gone into ourselves. And so I think it's so bad that we actually think we invented the universe, our species. We live in a clockwork universe. Who makes clocks?
Right.
Not God or nature.
Yeah, man.
We're biological robots. And how do you get there? Well, you start by looking at nature and projecting onto it a machine. Again, a human anthropomorphism. And then you see yourselves in that mirror. And so again, for me, things like AI are just complete nonsense. I mean, AI is BS. I mean, it's just, there is no artificial intelligence.
No.
And consciousness is not made up of just logos, rationality.
No.
There's no consciousness without a beating heart and emotions. And so another piece of what's going on to me, whether it's encountering crop circles or synchronicities, is speaking to the personal, making a personal connection. I talk about in the book, and I'm sure you could probably tell me some stories about this, that often there's little synchronicities between the phenomenon and the researchers. Like I talk about in the book, Colin Andrews in the 80s couldn't afford one summer to go.
That popped up just by his house. Yeah.
So, and there's, I know 100 stories like that. And
we've all got them.
Yeah. Every little researcher has gotten these little winks.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my tickets booked to the UK before the Milk Hill went down.
Yeah.
And then it's on CNN and my phone's ringing off the hook and all that. So, and I think part of that is that, whether it's synchronicity or crop circles, again, when there's this honoring of the personal, honoring of your heart, honoring of saying, I feel or know, this connection feels that we are searching for it, that we're connected to it, that we're putting in the work. I would, you could even go so far as to say it's kind of like the Peter Pan theory of, if you believe in it, you'll make it. That part of what happened with the blooming of the phenomenon in the 80s and 90s was we paid more attention to it and it reciprocated. So that's a way of looking at it. But I do definitely see the psyche as a field. I believe that without falling into all kind of new agey, therefore we control everything and you can manifest your thoughts on it. That's all ego. Okay. But the psyche as a field that we do not control, that is bigger than us, that is timeless and, locationless, not control. I mean, Jung said, there's a dimension of our experience that is not controlled by time and space. That's synchronicity outside of time and space.
I had Veronica Goodchild on recently.
Yes, I know, bro. Yeah.
Wonderful. And we talked obviously about the imaginal realm and this role, and that's been referenced in the crop circle specifically. In a mathematical equation, Euler's equation, EI pi equals 1 + 0. The I is the square root of -1, which is an imaginary number, which is used in air traffic control to locate where we use in the physical world to locate where planes are in space, right? So there's this imaginal reality connection in this crop circle that's given us this. It's so fantastic. There's a couple of things, lots of things were bouncing up as you were saying that.
Yeah.
Obviously, you referenced that before with Matt about Rupert Sheldrake and his first book about people, the sense of being stared at. 55%. It's a significant statistic which shows that the mind can't be contained. I've been a martial artist since I was 5 years old. Okay, and when I was 16, I did this Indonesian art called Kateda. And we used to do this stuff with what they called central power, but it was basically like chi work. And we used to do this, what they were called one directional training, where a teacher would stand behind you and he would push chi to one of his hands and you would have to sense it with your back to him and then hold your hand up. It's a 50-50 split, but we did the statistics and it was above chance, right, that we were doing, this stuff. So that's when you passed your grading, when you got above the statistics. So I knew from an early age that...
Well, that's where you were.
Sorry?
You were at Jedi school. That's
right. Jedi school, yeah, at 16. So I loved all that stuff. They used to break bricks on us, and we used to break bricks with our feet and do all this breathing work. And I still do it. I don't break bricks or do any of that nonsense anymore. But I went further and further into the internal arts, which has been my sort of shadow work. Because the ultimate in martial arts is that you're trying to combat all the things that hold you back and stop you from reaching your own potential and all that kind of stuff. That's part of how it goes. So
I'll just add to that really briefly, just so folks know, and I talk about this in the book, is that the connection to psychic powers and combat and hunting is well documented.
Documented.
World War II, pilots were trained. If you're coming out of the clouds, sneaking up on another plane, don't look directly at it. Now, this isn't a plane. Another thing, sometimes hunters are told when they're stalking a prey, don't look directly at the prey because it'll sense you're there. So this is not,
it's not. People know it, and Rupert's subsequent work about dogs knowing that you're coming home, that proves it again. This thing of also Rupert again with rationalism and over reliance on it is that they're even fixing the constants, like the constant of gravity, and still thinking that they've got it right in their arrogance. These scientists, when he published that book, The Science Delusion, and showed that science isn't being practiced as science, they're fudging it so that they have control over it. That really shows that level of ego that I think you're speaking of there, right, doesn't it?
Yes.
And the other thing I just wanted to add on to what you just said was Jeffrey Kripal. Have you come across his work?
Yes. Yeah.
He talks about in Authors of the Impossible, not only is the mind spatially like a field, it's non-temporal in that sense, but the time, it can be in the future. That as an author, as a writer, you seem to tap in and sometimes flick forward in the pages of the book of your own life and see what's coming.
Yes.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The psyche is not controlled temporally or spatially, and it extends beyond. So, and again, the New Age wants to make it something that we can control. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we experience this phenomenon, whether it's precognitive dreams, which are very common. I mean, not very common, but, well documented at this. Certainly something I've experienced. The psyche extends beyond time and space, and we can, we can, whether it's things like, deja vu, see again, to me that speaks of having seen something in a dream, and then we meet it in reality, which is an experience that I've had. So I think
and it's one of those things where we've all experienced like the strange phenomenon, and yet like you say in your book, we sort of rationalize it away. Like the hoax phenomena gives us the way where we can have that doubt, and we can take away the magic of what it actually is that we don't understand, that's mysterious. But these things happen, and pretty much everybody's had them happen to them in one form or another, and to lesser or greater degree. And you mentioned also that I mentioned my landlord, his theory of consciousness was, which was quite radical because everyone was looking for neurons, was that there was this emotional or affective tag that came onto a thought that pushed it into consciousness. So he sort of gave this, visual metaphor of consciousness of being like the water, the ocean, and that, sort of emotions that weren't really, that pressing were sort of down in the depths of the ocean, and the ones that were really pressing, like, I got to pay that bill, or, oh my God, my relationship's on the edge, they would attach to a thought and pop into consciousness. It's a nice idea, a nice model. But you mentioned that synchronicities and these things, as Jung pointed out, happen to people that are usually going through breakups or there's been a death. What sort of data has there been to sort of correspond that, if any?
Well, that's interesting. I'm going to be doing a multi-week series course on synchronicity and the goddess of meaning in the spring, and starting in March, through Young Academy. And that's one of the things that my partner, Cynthia, my partner in the course, she's interested in that kind of stuff. So she could probably answer that a bit better than I could. But in the book, and, I give a quote from Albertus Magnus, who's a teacher of St. Thomas Aquinas, which is from 500 years ago or something, saying that when the soul is, moved with emotion, it can affect the, events and the objects in the world. And so, whether it's things going back like that 500 years, or, really that is sort of such a subjective observation. I think it would be hard to anything more than a lot of anecdotal data, but certainly that is my experience and my case. When we're filled up with emotion, break up with somebody, run into them all over town, that there is something to when we're in a specially transitional or liminal space, or, a death, a birth, an ending, a beginning, certainly also synchronicities are certainly just simply easier when you're in motion, when you're out in the world. It's pretty hard to have one sitting at home by yourself. Although that's possible.
Wait, it is possible, but yeah, it is. You pick up a book, or it falls off the shelf and stuff comes on the TV. I've had that many times, but yeah, there is this flux. There also, like people say, like Csikszentmihalyi, with when you're in the flow state, when your own consciousness is the opposite of sort of depression, and you're motivated and you're enthusiastic and you're out there, that things like that respond to you more, or have a likelihood to respond to you more.
Yeah. I think that, Jungian psychology is basically very Taoist, and that, that there is a path, there is a flow, but it's not ego controlled. And, it's sincerity, it's authenticity. And it's,
It's what Bruce Lee said. You need to try and find a way to honestly express yourself. So I can perform all kinds of flashy moves, and you'll think I'm a great martial artist, but it's just be theatre, right? But if I can honestly express myself, and I've spent some time in West Africa, with the music. I got involved in the polyrhythmic music, and there are these moments when dancers, as Elizabeth Gilbert described, where they sort of step through the portal, and everybody's head turns because there's something special going on with that dancer in that particular moment. That's when they used to say, Allah, Allah, God is there. That's where Olay come from, the bullfighters, I think. That's what so there was actually a reference to God when somebody went into that state of sort of something happening to them.
Yes.
But it was accepted that it wasn't an ego thing. It wasn't the ability of that person at the moment. It's just that they got touched with something because of their dedication to the art and the amount of hours they put into it and so on.
Yes, and an inner
sincerity.
Yeah.
Speaking of objects, connection to objects you mentioned, one of my favorite sort of philosophical documentaries is Hubert Dreyfus with Being in the World. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
So his whole thesis, I would say, is that we understand ourselves more by how we connect with objects in the world. So he talks about mastery, and he gives examples of the jazz musician and the Japanese carpenter who's becomes one with his playing, and the martial artist who takes a stick and starts twisting and twirling the stick, and that stick becomes a part of his whole body, that he doesn't feel a stick and actually thinks that the stick is moving him rather than he's moving the stick, and that kind of stuff. Where does that fit into, or does it fit into?
Yeah, no, it's sure. I mean, to me, it does. And to me, I think like this sort of Taoist way of thinking about the world, that it's always not always possible, but it's possible to move through life with a lot of, with some amount of time of your experience being in that flow state. And again, it sort of, again, this is Zen, but without trying.
Right.
You're not trying to do something. You're just being authentic. You're being real. And some people are doing that all the time, and other people are doing the opposite. But we certainly can live more and more from a place of just trying to be real, trying to be authentic, trying to, be genuine. And I think that's what Taoism is. And I think that has a role in the crop circle world. I think that's, why the researchers have those blessings, to have a synchronicity for them.
Yeah.
And I think, it can happen in these moments of sort of ecstasy or whatever, but it can also be just very quiet and very, in interaction with another human. You're in the right place at the right time. Oh, you left and now you're here and you ran into this person. It's just a sort of, it has a humility to it as well. And accessible to everyone,
We're all in it. We're all in it. It's that aspect of, because that initial personal contact that you spoke of, I know from my own experience that it can be a big push to the ego. The ego gets a big burst of power and thinks, oh, I'm special. I've been chosen. I'm a messenger. I'm a messiah. I've got to run out and I've got some mission, and I've been given a mandate. And I've been there, Manic Street Preacher, for a few years before you go, hang on a minute. If I was watching myself from the other side of this, I've lost it here.
Mm-hmm.
So it amplifies the side of yourself that you're not really aware of how it is having an effect on others, or it's coming across to others, or how you're actually projecting yourself. It amplifies that to the extent where, if you're careful enough, you can catch yourself and then change your behavior, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think there is that stage, especially in the first half of life, where we can have these experiences that inflate us and that get us all high. I think as we approach midlife, certainly in my experience, for men, you're sort of living closer to your shadow. You're sitting with all the crap you've done and all the perfection that you have, and so it's a little harder to get high on yourself when you're aware of your
exactly.
actions.
Yeah, I talked about in that presentation I mentioned earlier. I talked about the role of iboga, the plant ibogaine. I've had some experience with my sort of when I first just before I met the crop circles, the guy that took me to the crop circles, I'd been researching psychedelics. So there's been this kind of theme of investigation with psychedelic plants along my research with the crop circles as well. And there's been reference to psychedelic mushrooms and stuff with crop circles. Are you aware of that?
No, not really. But...
There has, yeah. There's been some crop circles which have specifically made reference to psychedelic plants, particularly mushrooms, which is really interesting. But I talk about iboga, which gives this this one plant from that you can go to Gabon in Central Africa to experience this. The Bawiti tribes use it. And it gives you this life review. Pretty much everyone who has it gets this, what they call the life review, where you get to experience how it felt to be on the other side of what you did to somebody from their perspective whilst you're on the trip. So that you really get to be in that other person's shoes that you did something nasty to. So it makes you realize what you did, accept what you did, and then the whole ceremony is around letting it go and becoming reborn again, and then walking away from it. So these plants actually do this sort of like intense 24-hour psychotherapy.
Yeah,
I think
that's great to hear. I think, unfortunately, there is a lot of people using plant medicines in a way that simply reinforce their narcissism. So
I totally agree. There's a whole business and an industry out of it, unfortunately. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to go to have the authentic experience. I lived in Mexico until recently, and just before I left, I had a shaman come to my house and do an ayahuasca ceremony, and I have to say it was incredible. This guy wasn't on an ego trip. Fortunately, I'd had experiences before, so I could tell. And it really is, if done in the right way, in the right setting, with the right people, it can be transformative.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm a fan of psychedelics in general, but I do see both sides.
Yeah, there's a dark side, of course, as well. Okay, the other thing, you talk about the change of when European culture went through this transition from pagan mindset to Christianity, then to science. And we mentioned it earlier with the devil and, ways that we'd frame it and so on and so forth. But can you elaborate on the effect of that on culture, and then how that maybe distances us from where we once were, when we probably we did have a closer relationship to nature and this notion of the goddess? I want to bring this notion of the goddess theme in.
Yeah, the move to the rational mind.
Yeah.
So the basic idea, or the basic journey from a Jungian point of view, is a sort of cultural version of a person's childhood. So culturally and personally, we start unified with the mother. So the child and the mother are at one during gestation, and even after birth, there's a sort of, for at least a year or two, there's a sort of way that the mother and the child are almost of one consciousness at times. They're really united. And then as you get into the terrible 2s and 3s, that's when the ego emerges, and the child is becoming aware of itself and pushing away and separating. And then, you go on into adulthood from there. Well, culturally, the way we think about it is that the early agrarian cultures are kind of living at one with nature. So you see the mother goddess figurines celebrating the magic of birth and fertility and the world, and all those agricultural celebrations of the early pagan. That is really a testament to the fact that these people are living in a sense of wonder for the natural world, because it's their sustenance, and the magic of that is what keeps them okay and alive. And whether it's practical or genuine, they are honoring those gods to stay alive, and because it's what's moving through them. Then we get to the masculine tribes. And for me, this is where you start to see the emergence of the ego culturally, and you get more, I'm the one, I'm in control, I'm the only God, all this. For me, that's a very masculine message.
Yeah.
And so that masculine God image kind of parallels what we do with rationality, which is more and more ego, more and more sensate reality only, dismissal of things associated with the feminine, like intuition and feeling even, and becoming a more and more masculine sort of nuts and bolts, facts only kind of way of perceiving. And as I talked about earlier in the call, we even get to the stage we're at now, where we're so invested in ourselves and so caught in the rational world, and we've actually made rationality a religion, and we don't understand that. and along the way, the respect for the goddess got lost. Of course, we, 2,000 years, we've been in a masculine God image culture in the West. And all of that stuff, of course, went underground, literal witch burnings. I mean, so, we really burned this consciousness out of us and replaced it with a sort of a masculine consciousness that primarily believes in itself. Which is incredibly dangerous. And I think part of, what crop circles are doing for us is going to the extreme other end of it, because, and you can look at Rick Tarnas or other people talk about that at some point we need to have the masculine come back into union with the feminine. And so the masculine culture that we're living in, that is so rational, so dry, so missing of wholeness and soul, needs to come back to something more fructive, more moist, more life-giving, more generative, and that crop circles do that for us because they don't fit in the ego box. We can't just say, oh, it equals this, and we have to participate with the mystery. So that deflates the ego and allows us to go, hey, wow, there is something going on here. And I think honestly, most of us desperately, on some level, know that we need connection to something larger, to God or psyche or spirit or goddess or whatever you want to call it. I don't, I'm not telling people what to believe in, only that there is more than the rational world is telling you. And, crop circles through their position in grain. I mean, why are they in grain and not in metal? Or, like, this is not a sci-fi,
No.
So there's something about the living crop that it's trying to point us towards. And then also, in Jungian psychology, we talk about the self, which is the unity of the conscious and unconscious mind, the whole archetype that holds the whole thing of us together and allows us to grow and become who we are. The symbols of the self are those sort of centered images, like you see in the religious iconography, church windows, labyrinths, all these centered, whether it's circles or squares or these centered things. And of course, crop circles mirror that kind of geometry to us, so that it is suggesting both this return to the feminine and the archetype of the self, which is saying that this process is necessary. It's saying you need to encounter this. And so I've always been captivated by the crop aspect. Of course, you take the seed that goes in the dead earth and is reborn as the miracle of the feminine and the miracle of life. And, honestly, again, just to highlight the illness of modernity, which Jung wrote so much about, people questioning, like, is the world a simulation?
Yeah.
Who doesn't do that? Ask that question? Mothers.
Sure.
People who are given birth.
Absolutely.
Have a real good idea of where consciousness comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. Just ask that question to a woman who's given birth. That's a really good point, isn't it? Yeah. Is it a simulation? Because I often make a joke with women when they say, oh, we have to give birth. I go, yeah, but you don't have to shave. It's I usually get a slap for that, but it's that.
But yeah, there is a way that, people are, very, very disembodied these days. I used to think, I assume we're probably around the same age. I used to think, being a bit of a computer guy, earlier, that I was, had some disembodied issues myself.
Right.
The kids, I'm sorry, coming up now, it's 10 times worse.
I know.
Can't feel their body, totally disconnected. The cutting is an attempt to get back to feeling in the body. I know people and see people, especially the younger generation, that are so deeply disconnected from their bodies. It's terrifying.
I know.
And this crop circle thing is in a living plant and trying to, for me, return us to the idea that the bodily, the natural nature, has a sacredness, has a mystery, has a magic that we've lost You ask kids, where does their food come from? They say the store.
In the store.
We've really lost a connection to nature, and it's really important, and to instinct. And Jung talked about the loss of connection to instinct being one of the most difficult things. We've really lost that, and it's very dangerous. And I think all of this is connected.
Well, it really is, isn't it? I mean, you gave that great example going back to your interview with Matt. I can't remember the exact detail now, but you said something like, a synchronicity where you were just going out and you get something coming up in your head to take a raincoat or take a torch or something, and you're like, well, it looks fine. Why would I do that? But you took one anyway, and then you realize it's like your mother in your head, the intuition saying, don't forget to take your coat. Or you gave an example or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people experience this. For me, it was a headlamp.
That's it.
I went from a more rural place to a more urban place, and my rational mind said, you're not going to need the headlamp. But my intuitive voice had already said, hey, grab that headlamp and put it in your bag. And the ego said, what are you talking about? And 12 hours later, I was in a windstorm, and where I was staying, the power went out for a long overnight. So, the headlamp would have been handy.
So you've got the intuition there, and this connection to the two things that we spoke of earlier, which is this, mind having this temporal aspect, this bit where it can skip forward to the future and warn you of something that's to come. And again, most of us have experienced that in mind, which is magical.
Yes, and this sort of caring aspect, which, I mean,
yes.
One of the things I talk to people about with working with synchronicities is the first thing that gets lost is the body, is the heart, is the feeling, is like that there's an emotional connection, both either from you or from the other side. In this case, it's the other side.
Yeah.
Caring about me. And it is a quality of care.
Yeah.
And can we imagine that, the psyche that we participate in, or the field of consciousness, or God, or whatever you want to call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
Can we imagine that cares for us? I think most modern people have a real hard time.
They do. That's really true. You need to, and even those people who I know I've taken to the crop circles over the years. I'll tell you a story about I took a journalist. Right? Her mother had died, and she was quite a famous journalist. She's died now, passed away unfortunately, but her mother had died and she couldn't sleep, and she kept waking up. She kept having this dream or this visual, this image coming to her mind about fractals. So she got up and she Googled fractals like 3 a.m. in the morning, and crop circles came up. She's this journalist. She was an anchor on a news station in the US for years, and she's like, why haven't I heard of this? So she starts looking at crop circles more, and I'm going to book a ticket and get over there, right? So she comes over and hires me as her guide. So I take her to a crop circle, and she walks in, and I explain to her that it's on uneven ground and that these aren't really circles on the ground, they're ovals, and that, and then I show her the overhead, and she's a little bit blown away. And then I took her to the second crop circle, which was on Woodbury Hill, which was like an owl's eyes, an owl's face, big geometric, again, circular mandala. And then took her to the third one, just down the road at Stanton St. Bernard. And what I used to do when I used to take people to these crop circles was never tell them what they were walking into. I wanted to see their face, get that visceral, like, this is it. Once they've walked around and scratched their head to wonder. So she did that. She wandered around in this crop circle and then come over to me, and she was holding her heart, okay, and felt. The other two crop circles had just been sort of awe and wonder. This one, it got her, and she had tears in her eyes, and she was holding her heart, and she said, what is the image of this crop circle? So I pulled the picture out, and it was a hummingbird, and she broke down because her mother, all through her childhood, had put hummingbirds all over the house, fridge magnets, the whole 9 yards. So this connection with her mother dying and her getting up to look at the crop, fractals that kept coming to her mind, booking the ticket, come to the UK, walking into this mysterious crop circle. But later on, the rationality and the way that her colleagues and peers had sort of accepted it when she'd gone back full of all this.
Oh, they ruined it for her.
Took it away from her. Yeah, and so she then, as you've seen, you see people sort of turn against it and think they've been betrayed or conned in some way by something that was deep for them. So I've seen that happen along the way, where people can have that personal experience and have that caring and love given to them, and the power of what you talk about, this rational mind, this over rationalization, and everybody else around you, and our need to kind of fit in and not feel different, pull it away from you. That's been a powerful thing for me to witness many times through this journey.
Yes.
You talk about let me just I made a note of it. The as the mandalas progress, so a circle is the issue, is the symbol for the self. But as they progress in complexity geometrically, that mirrors the growth of the person. Can you talk to me a little bit more about how that?
Well, I mean, I think that, from the circle we get to the mandala, and the mandala is like a higher octave of the self in terms of its depiction. I mean, I don't really,
What does that mean in terms of like the person's growth? So like, starting off.
I wouldn't say too much about that. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I don't want to give out too many flowers because somebody saw a mandala or something. Yeah. I mean, people.
Say that again. What you didn't want to what?
Well, just because somebody has the one dream or vision of a mandala and someone else has a dream of a circle doesn't mean someone's doing better.
Oh yeah, of course, right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, I don't mean it. I don't. My question wasn't sort of directed at that. It's just like growth in terms of like as the complexity of the formations went up, that mirrors what I was looking for, and it's sort of an example of what you meant by that with somebody's growth that happens as their the complexity of the crop circles going from a circle to a mandala, or going to like an 8-fold or 13-fold. I didn't quite get the correlation between that and personal growth.
Yeah, no, I don't think I did say that.
You didn't?
I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure you did. I made a note of something along those lines, unless I got it completely wrong.
Close, but not quite connected.
Oh, okay. I apologize.
Oh, no.
Didn't I? I thought I made a note of that.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't give too many people like awards for consciousness, so I'm not gonna,
Yeah, I wasn't meaning that. I wasn't meaning that. I'll find it and come back to you with that then. Maybe because there's definitely something I read earlier when I was looking through your book where it said that about the circle being the symbol for the self.
Yes.
I mean,
mandala is a higher octave in a geographical sense, but not necessarily any more.
So you say from a Jungian perspective, it is remarkable that the emergence of the phenomena into greater complexity while maintaining its concentric form is a progression that mirrors the expressions of the self archetype.
Yes.
That's what I was.
Yes. Yeah. So what I'm saying there is that, okay, it started as crop circles and now we have crop mandalas, but it's still the same idea. It's still the self. And that, whether it's a circle and, I in Saskatchewan, I was in a very nice Celtic cross, 3-circle Celtic cross that way. So the circles are still around, but we're also getting these mandalas. And again, it all speaks to the self. It's all an archetype, in the Jungian sense. And the simple depiction is the circle. The mandala is the more complicated, but the central unifying principle that there's a connection between, a unity of conscious and unconscious, a simple symbol that expresses the divine, right? Like that's how people talk about the circle from the Greek.
The monad.
Yeah, there's a simplicity there, but also a
higher order of complexity. Yeah.
Yes, and so in the when we get up geometrically into the mandala, yes, we've progressed, but the unity of that connection between the the divine and the secular, the divine and the worldly, is continued, and obviously that's what crop circles is about. So, the unity of that, really speaks, and I think, I'm very proud of that book, and I think
you should be. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think that these notions about it hold up. like that it is something about our growth and our connection to something higher, and what does that mean for us? So where are we going? I mean, we're in a crazy time in the world, and
there's no question about that. And that's what I talk about, that, where we are with deception, and we oppose deception. We're in such a world now where, I posit the theory that this post-truth society that we're in, where people know everything's up for grabs now. The Beatles didn't write those songs, it was somebody else. And so we go, the solid ground I thought I was standing on, even listening to the Beatles, has gone now. It's been taken away from me. What's true anymore? Trump with fake news and disinformation and social media being blamed, whilst legacy media are telling us loads of lies. And so we don't know who to rely on. And that's a mess. When I look back to, for example, ancient civilizations, which the crop circles seem to punctuate, being in Wiltshire and being by Avebury and Stonehenge, and obviously I've looked at the and spoken to and become friends with a lot of people that research the stone circles in the area, because obviously there's a connection with the mysterious origins of those from back in the day, and the crop circles being the modern mystery that's sort of next to them. Geometry being the connecting factor, circles. Yes. And implicit geometry, that they contain some of these numbers, pi and the golden ratio and these sorts of things, which give us the ratio of beauty that's in the world and the ratio of creation and so on. So that all speaks to the divine. But this ancient civilizations that are around the world all seem to have had some connection to this bigger picture of reality of the goddess, and it seems built into their monuments universally with the same measurements and proportions, right?
Yes.
So we're being shown where we are now, and it seems at the same time we're being shown what we've lost.
Right.
Alton Barnes, I don't know if you know this, there's a book called Legendary Landscapes. A couple of people came to the crop circles in the 90s and wrote this book called Legendary Landscapes, and showed that Milk Hill is like the breasts of the goddess, and Knapp Hill, that's over the road from it, is the pregnant belly. And there's like a line that goes down into Eastfield. It's like an umbilical cord into Eastfield. That's why Eastfield seems to be the powerhouse of where most of the crop circles come, because it's coming straight from the goddess's belly. Did you know that?
I did not.
Okay, that's the Vale of Pewsey. And so looking at that area of England as well, the Salisbury Plain, is where the first area of trees were cleared and farming, agriculture began. So we've got context for the communication in that we moved from hunter-gatherer to animal husbandry and plant husbandry, in that area right there, and then built all these monuments around it in honor of the goddess, in honor of nature, in honor of. I think that's a powerful message.
Yes, and all the barrows with the burials, and all of the souls and the humans that participated in all of those rituals and walked those paths.
Right.
Thousands of people for hundreds of years up till modernity. All of that emotional and psychic residue is in those places,
no question.
In those.
The Ridgeway Path, which is like 6,000 years old, seems to connect through to Wales, where some of the stones from Stonehenge came, the blue stones and so on. And there's a guy called Bob Trubshaw who wrote a book called Singing Up the Country, I think it's called. It's about songlines of Avebury. It's the subtitle of it. And he likens the area to the same as sort of the Aboriginal culture, where they have songlines which animate the landscape with their stories, which are also practical maps. So he puts forward this theory that the Druids who came from Wales, that were, the large sort of stone circle builders, and Robin Heath has pretty much proven that Proto-Stonehenge was built in Wales first, would navigate their way from Wales through to Wiltshire to this sacred land, through song and the naming of the hills, Knapp Hill, Martinshill Hill, Golden Ball Hill. This is the animation of the landscape. There must have been songs and stories as people walked through to use as a map, and also to have this interpersonal relationship with the land through their songs.
Yes. And this is just making me think too of, you know, in the his book about Evan Wentz's book around the Celtic and fairy culture.
Yep.
Name of it right now. He talks about the balls of light. That people, this was a soul candle that would follow the body during burial, right? And then now we have not only tales of people seeing balls of light in connection to crop circles, but we have it on video.
There's no question.
You can watch the British military helicopters chase balls of light on the Quest for Truth DVD, which I still think is terrific.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what are those balls of light? And again, this is the mysteries of the world that, you know, our rational culture thinks it's gotten rid of all the magic and all the darkness and, you know, all the answers. And I think that there, you know, is so much that we're missing that we don't see. You know, we're talking about the burial mounds and the landscape in that part of the world. And, you know, Jung really firmly believed that the ancestors were present.
Yeah.
In some way. That, and in fact, maybe part of what we call the psyche is connected to the ancestors. Like we really don't know what consciousness is. We don't know what psyche is. But maybe there is a way that those who came before us are around in some form and connected to us, and the soul candle might speak to that. But this way of, like, you know, when I'm getting these little whispers about bring the headlamp, like, is that, you know, a more literal soul, or is that just a carrying psyche? What is that? And I think those kind of questions are really interesting, very mysterious, but meaning filled.
Yes.
And meaning giving.
Yes.
And much more interesting than the sort of dead rationalist worldview.
Yeah.
And I think this landscape and these places in England that are connected to the crop circle world are deeply woven in with these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Are you familiar with the Crooked Soli formation? It's the one with the mitochondrial DNA with 792, 504 elements. John Michel and Alan Brown wrote a little book about it.
I must have seen it, but
so the reason I bring that up is because it's got 792 and 504, which are these, you know, 792 is the diameter of the Earth and 504 is the combined radius of the Earth and the Moon. John Michel has used that formula to square the circle, unite heaven and earth. Yeah. So that's all contained within this mitochondrial DNA in this crop circle. The mitochondrial DNA only passes from the mother.
Mm.
So theoretically, the mitochondrial DNA that exists in us and in the woman goes all the way back to the primordial Eve. Now, the thing is, and I echo Marie-Louise von Franz, who said number is the primary archetype. So 792 and 504 add up to 1296, and going back to Hebrew gematria, when we convert that into those numbers into the alphabet, it says the goddess of all creation. Did you know that?
I did not.
That's a crop circle that appeared in 2002 and specifically relates to, and I bring this up because I've always said, when I spent 3 months in India, I had this Indian guru came over and I guided him around the crop circles and I had this magical set of experience with him, and then he invited me to India and they all talk about reincarnation, and I've always kind of held this position where I go, I'm not sure, maybe there's some other answer. So he's to try and come up with different ideas, right, for reincarnation other than reincarnation of the soul and like coming back as whatever. So I said, well, if the DNA is inside us, the primordial Eve DNA is in every cell in our body, and that's the ancestors, then surely there must be some kind of resonance. We don't know what DNA is. Most of the DNA, we call it junk. That's what the scientists say. Is, most of it's just junk, and there's only these little bits that really matter. Oh, really? Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Scientist. Do you know what I mean? Junk. We don't know.
Yeah.
But I posit that as another potential, or for connection to the ancestors, or what we would call quasi spiritual experiences could be right inside our blood.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And you're saying you're questioning about reincarnation. For me, I feel like, maybe it's more like a bush, and sort of our family is a bush, and that like we're just a little blossom on for one season, and then the bush continues. That's kind of
It's nice.
my that. Not literally like I'm just going, now I'm a dog, now I'm a plant, that's
Yeah, because I struggle with, like, my son could have been my dad. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
I've got trouble with that. Like, because I'm me, right? And I like the idea that only my unique set of genes on the one hand, which control the physical side of me, and then, well, if I take all of the things that constitute my potential in life, the opportunities that I will either screw up, or which are many, and coming back to what you say, when you get to our age in life, you go, I have to be humbled now. What was I thinking?
Maybe the alternative is pretty scary.
It forces you to work on all that stuff, doesn't it? As you get old, you just go, oh no. But the potential that is me is unique, and the potential that is you is unique. There's no one else that was born at the specific, that with that's it. What you have the potential to achieve is what you have the potential to achieve or not achieve in this life. I like that.
Yep, me too.
And so then when I think of it in terms of my children, I like it for them too, that they're unique. They're a bit of me, they're a bit of their mum, they're a bit of, my grandparents and their grandparents. And there's this little bit that's them that's added on to that. Like you said, this little flower but I also like the idea that we get one life and it lasts forever. This notion of the eternal soul, and that where we might go after this. This is just one of potentially infinite numbers of realities where we go to learn what it is to be conscious. I sort of like that too.
Yeah. And to me, I think it's easy to like see how both of those can fit together and sort of have family trees of karma. Jung certainly talked about that.
Yeah.
And I have, I look a lot like my great grandfather who fought in World War One. We just had Remembrance Day here. So
wow. Yeah, we just had it too. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you can kind of hybrid that too. You can say, well,
yeah. And then again, we're coming back to this bit where we project stuff onto it that's sort of like, do you know what I mean?
And we're allowed to and entitled to. And
exactly. And there's no need to go to war with other people over it, really, is there? You know what I mean? My imaginary friend's better than yours.
What
have I got left for you? So Veronica and I talked about this notion of moving from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And I got into the hot water with my son over this recently, because he's sort of totally anti-astrology. I'm not talking about astrology. I'm talking about our journey through the cosmos. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Do you think there is a connection to this bigger picture with the cosmos and our psyche and how we get affected, and what we can't resist and what we can resist? Because Veronica and I talked about the fact that if there's some sort of cosmic realignment going on where we're getting rid of these destructive, rational, logical ways where we can ration out killing, and we can ration out, the things that we've done in this last 100 years, this notion of drop the atomic bomb and kill 100,000 people to save 250,000 is a head equation, isn't it? It's not a heart equation.
Yeah.
And so if we're moving, from the head to the heart, and the age of Pisces and in the age of Aquarius has got something to do with that, then doing the shadow work and doing this part of acknowledging and integrating this side of ourselves, which we all have. Veronica and I were discussing the notion that that's something that's sort of being brought on to us all. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm not, I wouldn't place our, I wouldn't paint too much fancy paint over where we're at in our journey. Like we think we're getting past this stuff, but you know,
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think we're in a meaningful place for us to develop. I think, the function of crop circles and synchronicity and the mystery of life is to keep us from making the worst possible decisions and help us make better ones. Very often that making of better decisions happens in the internal conscious of a single person. We're talking about something like this, I always think of, my understanding is that there's been at least 2 times when there's been Russian sub-commanders have been given orders to start launching stuff, and they were like, "No, I'm just going to double check." And we avoided World War II. My understanding is multiple times because of individuals saying, "I'm going to check on this." So, those are big, grand decisions, but all of us are trying, hopefully, or becoming able to, if we're doing some work, to be a little better in our decision making and a little healthier and a little less damaging. And so I think crop circles being beautiful, being mysterious, being something that can have that experience like your newscaster friend there had,
Yeah.
that really opens the heart. Those are really powerful and life-changing things, and they do make the world just a little bit better. Now the struggle's big.
Yeah.
But the little things we do absolutely matter and absolutely make a difference. And, I think every good, healthy decision helps,
That's true, isn't it? Yeah, it's really true. Wow. So the government then, and their reaction to cover it up, we talked about that in terms of like being similar to the ego, really, in the way it rationalizes stuff out.
Yes.
I firmly believe, and the guy that took me to the crop circles was ex-CIA.
Wow.
He worked in the 60s, the Vietnam, anti-Vietnam movements and all that, and sort of Haight-Ashbury areas, and out the colleges with Castaneda and and into the cults with all that sort of stuff. So he had this perspective of the direction of the CIA and intelligence services sort of involvement with the New Age movement that they saw as the new, as people, as you said, look for meaning in their lives, and religion sort of goes off and science is, not adequate enough to fill that hole. The New Age has opened up with this hybridized, guru culture of...
Well, and the CIA loved those psychic researchers. That people can look that up. It's
didn't they just? Yeah.
U.S. government funded psychic research, for a long time. Very successful. In fact, it was so successful it was shut down.
He told me, right, that that they had their fingers, I say fingers, their eyes everywhere. And if they had reports of someone doing something that was, out of the ordinary, paranormal, on any level, they'd investigate. Someone would say, this guy over here is, he's been telling people the future and living in his street and doing tea leaf readings, and they'd have someone around there just to check him. He said that there was a massive, because they wanted, and if they found someone that was talented, they would, they'd be getting them off to one of their research programs.
Yeah. The remote viewing thing is very well documented and very legit. And so, and that to me, again, you have the government investing in the reality of the psyche transcending time and space.
Whilst still academia, mainstream, the battle of the hard question of consciousness, the hard problem of consciousness, that it's just neurons in the brain, and we're going to prove it. We've just got a few more things to clear up, and it'll all be sorted, and we'll have it all mapped out for you. That still goes on.
Yeah.
Even though.
So what did your CIA friend say about crop circles?
Oh, he took me to them, told me they were genuine. He set me on the whole path. He said that this is a massive cover-up. The Doug and Dave and the hoaxing thing is a government, thing to put the lid on it all, and look at how much money was put into it. And as I went to university in 2004 and did language and communication and media studies and worked in media for a while. I was living in Mexico with Jaime and doing stuff on the TV, and you get to know, don't you? Propaganda and how it all works behind the scenes. It's a bit scary when you don't know that stuff, but when you do know that that's how the world sort of really works behind the scenes, then. And so something like this, crop circles, because I was translating when I was in Mexico. I was translating. The CIA were just releasing all of the UFO stuff, the vaults that they called them, And so one of the journalists there, Carlos Clemente, was pulling out the records, and they were going through them and putting them on the show. And then they'd do a show on, oh, this UFO happened and it intercepted this airline pilot with his plane, and this happened and that happened, and the CIA turned up and did this and investigated this, that, and the other, or if materials they say was recovered, and there was all this in these vaults, and I would translate it from Spanish to English. And at the same time, listening to the Pentagon papers, where these hearings that are happening now, where really in 6 years or 7 years they haven't really given us much at all. You've got this really strange scenario with the Pentagon going, no, there's nothing going on here. Yeah, but you can have permission to be a whistleblower if you like. And the whistleblower's going, yeah, I can't really tell you. They would have to do that in a private session. And this whole head fuck, right, of what's going on with the UAPs. And I talked to Karen Alexander and say, like, I know that there's something fishy going on with all those things, or I really feel there is, because the crop circles. There's so much. When we take away the ones that we know people are making them and stuff, but they're like the Milk Hill formation. That is a big formation that defies, and so you have to get, as Karen says, one of the 3-letter agencies stepping in and muddying the waters over that, because it's just too big. And I have that opinion.
Yeah, and if again, I would say folks can watch British military helicopters chasing balls of light on YouTube and on Quest for Truth, and this is not, we're not making stuff up.
I did on 777, I did that formation where they appeared in front of me. And then the following year, for a year, I got emails from people saying, "Are you going to do another one on 888?" Right, the following year. So I said, sure. So we had 200 people. We all went up on Nap Hill and Milk Hill and spread out, and there were people playing drums, and someone put a tea tent up, and it was like a mini festival. Do you know what I mean? This bloody night watch, right? The guy that had filmed it the year before had all of his cameras set up. He's got these night vision cameras and stuff. He had some cameras pointed over towards Milk Hill, some pointed down at Nap Hill, right? So it went on to, there's hundreds of people milling about. Following morning, first light, there's a huge 8. It's in a figure 8, hundreds of circles.
Yeah, I remember the 777 and the 888.
888. Okay, so 888's there, right? And there's hundreds of people. No one saw anything, but the night vision camera that was aimed at Milk Hill at about just before first light, which is when it usually happens, that veil when the thin between the two realities seems to thin. This ball of light comes out of the ground, just seems to materialize out of the bushes, right? And then move off towards the opposite direction, towards the Vale of Beauty, and a helicopter comes in the scene and chases it. And that's, if you watch the 3rd episode, wow. Episode 3 of Embrace the Mystery, the documentary that we made, has that footage.
Wow.
And it was like a proper apparition ball, like one of those misty cloud ball of lights that just moved off, and this helicopter comes straight in. And just, so many people have seen it. There's so much evidence of something's going on. Don't know what it is. Didn't see little green men. Don't know about that.
Yeah, well, it goes so far back. We have it in our language and our folk literature. This is the soul candle, or the ball of light, or the will-o-wisp.
Yeah.
It goes so far back. It goes all the way back.
Yeah. Magical stuff, huh? Gary, it's been a pleasure, mate. Thanks very much for joining me.
Pleasure being with you, Gary.
It's been really good. So what you got going on now? So I'm going to put links to your book, obviously, sure. and your Jungian Online Academy. And what's the Arcademy?
So Jungian Online is a referral site for folks that want to work with an analyst. We had classes and presentations through that, and then a couple of years ago we just split off our educational piece, and that's the Jung Academy. A link, would be great to let folks know that. Yeah, I'll put that in the link. Classes on lots of stuff. If they like this, they're going to like a lot of the stuff that we have there. So
I'm going to sign.
So it's like Archetypes Academy.
Archetype Academy, yeah. And the Jungian Online is for people who want to actually go through the process of
Yeah, I match people with we match people with therapists to work via video, an analyst or a Jungian oriented therapist.
Wow.
Yeah, we've
Wow.
had that since 2011. So
Oh, fantastic.
yeah,
And so just give me a brief description of how that works, like analyzing dreams or meaningful events or the
yeah.
whole.
No, I mean it's Jungian analysis. So via video. So yeah, generally the primary work people bring is their dreams. So, but an analyst is just like a therapist. So everything that's going on in your life, you're going to talk about with your analyst if you want to. But yeah, it's very dream driven. So the data that they want to most look at is the dreams, because that's gonna confirm or deny what they're seeing going on in your own life.
Sure.
So
Sure.
yeah, that's Jungian online to get hooked up with an analyst.
I might check that out myself, you know.
All
27,
right.
27 years of experience in the crop circles I could probably do with talking to somebody.
We got lots of really good people, so I'd be happy to hook you up.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to put links for that in the description below.
Okay.
People can get your fantastic book on Amazon. I'll give a link for that in the description below. Gary, thanks so much for joining me, mate. This has been fantastic.
Great to be with you, Gary. Let's talk again, maybe just between us sometime too.
I'd
It'd be
love to
great
do that. That'd be
to
great.
go forward.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Brilliant.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay.
Cheers. Cheers.
Take care.